joined us the previous 3 sessions for Studio Visit. This is our 4th. And today we are excited to bring to the Zoom studio the wonderful and illustrious Miss Jamea Richmond-Edwards. And I will actually read her bio, which is not, this is the abbreviated bio, right, Jamea?
Is it the new one? I sent you a new one too. Did you get the new one I sent you?
I got it.
Okay, cool.
All right. Cool. And you read, Jamea Edwards creates monumental scale mixed media collages utilizing a variety of papers and hand-drawn elements. Her work focuses on Black Americana and the intersection of Blackness and Indigenous American culture. Her current body of work explores American and pre-colonial history by examining her ancestral roots in the southeastern parts of the United States. Born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, Richmond-Edwards graduated with a Bachelor of Arts degree from Jackson State University in 2004, where she studied painting and drawing and went on to earn an MFA in painting from Howard University in 2012. She is a recipient of the 2019 Joan Mitchell Painters and Sculptors Award and a 2020 Joan Mitchell Artist in Residence. Jamea has exhibited her artwork nationally and internationally, including the California Art Museum, African American Museum, the Charles H. Wright Museum in Detroit, here, the Kravets Wehby Museum or Gallery in New York, and her work is included in the collections of the Studio Museum of Harlem and the Rubble Family Collection. She currently resides in Maryland with her husband and 3 sons. And I think I did that backwards. I think I was supposed to introduce my cohort and partner in this, Philip Harvey. But I'll let Phil, introduce himself, and then Phil, why don't you take it away from there?
Okay, sure. Here, first of all, I want to say hello to everyone. Thank you for coming. This is a very, very special time. This is actually our, we're up to our 4th installment of Studio Visit. I start off by giving thanks to Drake, a partner for almost 30 years, on inviting me to join him in this. I think it was timely. And I can speak for Drake and say that we have both been very, very dedicated, presenting the cultural arts and the people who create the work as best we can and support them in the best ways that we can. And we want to give super thanks to Emar Hutchins, Sabrina Nelson, Carl Nunez, who I believe most of them are in the house today, so we want to give thanks to them as well for making this so far a great success. And we are, of course, very, very happy and very excited about today's guest, Jamea Richmond-Edwards, who for some time now has been lighting up the art scenes, we may say. I know that she was named one of the 10 female artists of color on the rise by the Root magazine. She's 40 Black artists you know by the Huffington Post. Drake touched upon a number of other things as well. The Rubel collection is
Rubel, yeah.
It's huge. You'll see her on the sets, beautifying the sets of Empire as well. Some questions as well as that. We want to welcome and say a great thank you for joining us to Jamea Richmond-Edwards. How are you today?
I'm well. Thank you, gentlemen, for inviting me. I'm, really excited to dig in. Let's unpack this.
Let's go. Well, so Jamea, we read your bio. Phil said a few things about you. Tell us a little bit about your journey, because speaking to you, it sounds real spicy.
It's a little spice in there. I'm going to start. You want me to start with the screen share right now?
Yeah, if you want to do that, that's fine, and then we can go from there.
Okay. Yeah, so I'm gonna put the screen share on. All right. Can y'all see that?
Yep, we can see it.
All All right, so yeah, as you guys know, as you mentioned, I'm from Detroit.
All righty.
Born and raised, West Side, 7 Mile. What up, though? You know, um, I went to Henry Ford, the
Oh,
best high school in the city. You know, um, don't be laughing, Drake.
hey,
You
no hate here. No hate.
no hate. Okay. Because
No hate.
when I say I'm from Detroit, people always ask, like, did you go to Cass? And I'm like, no, I didn't go to Cass.
I didn't go to class.
4 dogs.
Who said that? Somebody. So
Cast folks in the audience, though.
Lord help us. My sister being one of them. So
he is in the house.
okay.
Tied up in the house.
So what I'm going to do is, before I get into the work, I'm going to start right here because this is a very important piece on my journey. But from Detroit, I was one of those people as a child. I knew since I was age 3, 4 that I wanted to be an artist. And one of the memories that came to that kind of popped up in my head about a couple of months ago is I remember being 4 years old and I used to obsessively draw Betty Boop. And I remember drawing her and I would draw it on lined paper, but I figured out my sister is 6 years older than me. No, my brother was 6 years older than me and my sister is 13 years older than me. So when they would have their textbooks that they would bring home from school, you know, like their math, biology book, I would burn out all the line paper that my mom would give me, all the typing paper. But I realized once you open those textbooks, the first 2 to 3 pages of those textbooks are blank pages. So I was tearing them drawings out, you know, and drawing on it. And when they would bring a textbook in, I was like, "Ooh, good, you know, fresh white paper." But I was putting Vaseline on the backs of the drawings and hanging it up on the wall. So at that young age, you know, I don't know if I had, you know, went to an exhibition at that point, but I knew very young that I wanted, you know, people in my household to see the art, to acknowledge what it is I was doing. So at that point, my mother, she put me in a arts program at College for Creative Studies in Detroit. And I started taking art classes. And from that point forward, I was just always into art. Although Henry Ford, by the time I entered into high school, Henry Ford only had 1 year art and it got rid of the art program. So I was taking art classes at Wayne State University for gifted and talented high school students. So I was always, even though I didn't have it in my, you know, everyday high school life, I was always around amongst young people who was serious about it, who had grit. And, you know, when I was younger, when I stayed on 7 Mile, I stayed off of Hayden. And there was
and for people who don't know what 7 Mile is, that's 8 Mile is the dividing line of the city, but I like to describe 7 Mile as the soul of the city. That's where that's everything is along 7 Mile. You know, 7 Mile is like where the Black folks kind of all reside in Detroit, right? I mean, thoroughly Black, all east to west.
That's right. And so when I was living off of 7 Mile, there was this woman, an elder on our block named Miss Gurney. And my mother used to be so proud of these drawings that I was doing. I'm like, you know, at this point I'm 12, 13 years old. She shows Miss Gurney. Miss Gurney's daughter is Marietta. I don't know her last name, but Marietta was one of the first Black female designers, car designers, and she designed the Beretta car. So what maker is that? The Beretta. Y'all remember that? I don't know if this was Chrysler or
Chevy.
What is it?
It's the Chevy.
It's the Chevy. Okay. So she's the one who designed this car. So I remember, you know, coming in this woman's living room and meeting her daughter, and she was like, "You know what?" Marietta was like, "You should go into car design. That's where it's at, is car design." And I was like, okay. And she connected me with her mentor, who was he was at Ford, I believe. He was a car designer. And I entered into a car design class. I didn't like it, but you know, it was really great exposure. at that time, I really thought I wanted to be a fashion designer. So just drawing up, you know, in my sketchbook, envisioning dresses, took a sewing class, hated it, you know, whatever. So post graduating from Henry Ford, I decided to go to Jackson State University in Mississippi. And I didn't know why I wanted to go there. It was a flyer on the table in my counselor's office, and it's Jackson State University. And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna apply here. You know, no, I had no clue about Mississippi, Jackson. And I also want to note that I was in marching band. So I played an instrument from elementary all the way throughout high school. And so once I decided like, oh, okay, I guess I'll go to Jackson State, I auditioned for the band and wound up joining the band in Jackson State. So, you know, go through Jackson State, HBCU, the best time of my life, literally some of the best time of my life. Met my husband. I started illustrating for a magazine called Jackson Free Press, which gave me a lot of exposure. And I ended up illustrating a children's book as well. So senior year of college, me and my, you know, then boyfriend, I got pregnant in my senior year of college. Like we was doing a whole lot, you know, we was having a real good time. And, you know, where my goals was initially, once I leave college, undergrad, I'm going to go to New York. But once I got pregnant, I'm like, okay, you know, we got to shift things a little bit. So once I graduated, I went we moved to Detroit for a couple of months, but I settled in Milwaukee we ended up being in Milwaukee for 3 years. And so we decided we hated Milwaukee. And once we, you know, decided we got to get out of Milwaukee, we came into the DMV area. So this piece right here, can you hear me, Drake?
Yeah, oh yeah, yep.
Oh, okay, cool. I just want to make sure. So by the time we came to the DMV, you know, by that point, I knew I can draw. I always painted. But I, you know, the pressure on artists is you have to have your own style, you know, and prior to that, I was like doing drawings of Jay-Z and Beyonce, which is nothing wrong with that. But I knew that, okay, if I want to make it into the art world, I got to have some sort of style about myself. And so I used to paint. I was always an oil painter. And so we had moved into a loft, which didn't have a lot of ventilation. And I had these two younger kids, and I had, so at this point, by the time we moved to the DMV, I have 2 sons. So I'm like, I can't poison them with turpentine and oil paint. So let me figure out something else. So I decided to collage and use ink pen. So this is the first piece, one of the first pieces I did using ink and collage. It was a very spiritual process. And I'm like, okay, let me just try to test something out. So this is my first non-oil painting. And when I did this, I'm like, ooh, okay. This is kind of unique. Where after doing it, I knew it was something a little special about it, right? And this piece is titled Green Dress, and this was like 08, 09-ish, circa 08, 09.
08, 09, okay.
Yeah. So now this is 2009, 2010-ish, right before, and at this moment I decided to go to Howard University for graduate school. I'm 28 years old and I'm like, okay, I'm ready. Also, I've been teaching. I taught at a Catholic high school. I was teaching at the time at a Catholic high school in Washington, D.C. And I'm like, okay, so this piece was really interesting. This previous one I did. So from here, I was like, what happened? What would happen if I let the paper hang off the canvas? And I did this, and it's just like, ooh, okay, all right, this is real interesting. And I started gluing the flowers on, and this is one of the first pieces I sold to a collector. And shout out to Shawanda Roundtree. I had an exhibition in DC, and she purchased this. And you know, Shawanda at the time, she was the hot young collector, and you know, she believed in the kid, and she purchased this painting. So so as I go through this presentation, you guys are going to see how my process is evolving, right?
Absolutely. Can
So
I,
now,
Jamea, can I say something about that? Because I'm so glad that you're gonna talk about that, because you use a whole palette of materials and mediums in your work, and it's not always visible when you see it in a two-dimensional way, but there's
yeah,
really a lot going on here.
it is. And I think that my thinking at the time was, okay, you know, I always, at this point, I'm interested in collage. And I kind of committed to myself at this moment that if I'm going to commit myself to collage, I want to push it forward. We know the sort of godfather of collage within the Black arts community is Romare Bearden. And I'm like, okay, so if he's the one of the OGs within it, how can I take this foundation that he's built and kind of evolve it, move it to the next level? That's how my brain works, right? So in Howard, I did this. This is my second year at Howard University. And this is a very, very important piece because we had a critique. And, you know, those of you who were in graduate school or undergrad, you know, art critiques can be brutal, you know, amongst your peers. Folks be trying to take you down sometimes. And I remember presenting this at Howard, and we had some guest critics. And one particular critic, he said, this is not working. And he told me, get rid of it. It's too much going on. I don't like it. And I'm just like, you know, my feelings was hurt. But I believed in the work, you know, it didn't falter. This piece was called Wings Not Meant to Fly. And I created this particular body of work in relationship to my thesis, my graduate thesis, which focused on my auntie. And my aunt, she was murdered in 2006. 2007, because I was pregnant at the time. And you know, she was a drug addict in the city of Detroit, and it was a very brutal murder. She was in her 50s, petite woman, and two young men murdered her, left her body on, you know, on somebody's lawn. And it took me a long time to even process it. I kind of like put it aside. And so what I decided to do was to in honor of her memory, you know, she was just, you know, this person who was able to be disposed, but to me, she was my angel, you know. I always looked at her as just a very beautiful person. And so I created these pieces. This was a whole body of work, and it was called Shrines. And it was a dedication to her. And what I did was I was looking at the archetype of Medusa. And, you know, when we think about Medusa, we think about her as this really ugly mother, right? With the snakes. But Medusa was a goddess. And, you know, she was sort of banished because, you know, somebody hated on her, and they turned her to this sort of ugly creature, and she lived off in the wild or the woods. And I'm paraphrasing it. This is my graduate work from 10 years ago. Then I can't remember all the details of it, but I saw that correlation to, you know, my aunt, and just growing up in Detroit, you know, as an 80s baby, you know, I remember, you know, Dave Chappelle talk about same thing that's happened in Detroit, happened in DC. He left DC, came back, and he was like, damn, it was a crack bomb that went off. You know, you're looking at the people, looking at the community. I mean, it's ignorant, but it's real, right? So, you know, I'm the generation whose, you know, aunts, mothers, fathers who were affected by that. So, but people will look at it outside and be like, oh, these people were just some addicts or whatever. But they, you know, that's from an objective perspective. But, you know, within households, you know, people who were able to maintain relationships with their family, they weren't viewed that way. So this piece was called Wings Not Meant to Fly. And this was the piece that was on Empire. And although I don't watch Empire as much because I don't watch a lot of TV, it was up until the last season that my mother and aunt told me, my mother and sister told me, like this piece was still in the shot. It was in Lucia's living room or dining room.
Yep.
So yeah.
Before we go forward, I want to make a comment because I think it's really interesting. You were talking about from very early on knowing what you want to do and this kind of creative thing you want to harness, and now you're kind of getting into some of the things that you saw when you were young, when you were a child, and what I see is a lot of the work you do. It still keeps that theme. It shows how observant you were at a young age. Is that fair to say? Were you kind of just collecting all this information?
Absolutely. And I'm glad you said that, because this is part of my 7 Mile Girls series. And so even though we talk about it's very dichotomous, you have the crack bomb that went off, right? Whatever. This community is very hard hit, systemically disenfranchised. But even in spite of that, people still maintain their flyness, their spirits, and to me, that's just like a continuum of our experience here in America. There's always some shit going on, right? Let's hit them with slavery. Okay, cool. We gonna bounce back. We gonna still be fly. We gonna still have our livelihood. But let's hit them with with heroin, and now crack, and now etc. It keeps building on, right? And so so the other part is, so in my home, my mother was a dancer, so she did social dancing. We call it bopping in Detroit.
Bob dancing in Chicago.
DC.
Bob dancing in Chicago. Head dancing in DC.
Yeah, right. So so I would tell my mom, like, oh, what costume you wearing this weekend? Because my mom was dressed to the nines, like sharp, okay? And she would have the matching wigs. So while this is going on, we have a family member on drugs, and we're living on 7 Mile. We're surrounded around a lot of violence, but still is love and beauty there, right? And so growing up in the 90s, the Gucci sweater was a very essential staple within the city. And so what I started doing is incorporating that motive in my work. I'm a 90s kid, so it's going part of my upbringing is going to be in it. So I'm gonna fast forward into 2 years ago for my first major New York solo show was Fly Girl Fly, and it was and I was looking at my upbringing in Detroit, like how we were interested in fashion, what did that entail, and this sort of ecosystem that exists within the Black community of how we obtain our fly gear. And so a very essential piece of, the economy within our community is the booster. So you had the boosters that, who would come to the beauty salon. My stepfather had a connect. I remember for my senior pictures, I wore a bootleg Versace outfit, I have a friend whose father sold Gucci purses that he would get from China. You know what I'm saying? Like this is real. And so this exhibition kind of dealt with my relationship with fashion through the perspective of my community, right? And so this woman right here is standing next to this headless white mannequin, and I made her headless and white because I think oftentimes when we talk about how colorful we are, some of the decisions we make about how we present ourselves is always in relationship to whiteness, right? I had a conversation with
The white gaze.
a scholar. This was last year, and we were talking about how flamboyant Black people are. We go wear some loud ass colors, right? And one of her perspective was, is it because we oppressed? And what I had to tell her was, like, in the hood, in the community, we're not thinking about white people. When we laying our baby hair down and laying our edges, we are not. To me, this is how I look at it. When we used to do the treetop ponytails and spritz it, and it'd be all,
not consciously.
I would argue, I don't think we were thinking about it at all. because when, in terms of some of the fashion decisions we're making, now we will take the brand itself like Gucci and we gonna make it fly. And you look at a Dapper Dan, because these designers are still looking at us to inform, you know what I'm saying, their flavors, their styles.
Right.
So for me, although this, you know, we are kind of brand hungry, which is cool. You know, we just like luxury. We're into luxury. We like luxury. I think we're just a very, you know, luxurious people. We like to be blinging and shining, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I made sure that she was headless, because I'm like, we can't be giving them that much credit. You know what I mean? For our ingenuity.
Jamea, I know also, and in Fly Girl Fly, some that you deal with the themes of kind of fashion company abuse and some of the abuses they've done. You mentioned Dapper Dan. You know, one thing I learned from reading about this was the case of the Black woman designer who designed Jackie Kennedy's dress and never got credit for it. And so you kind of cited some of the abuses by the fashion's corporate structure on the talent of Black fashion designers too.
Absolutely. And there's this, I remember seeing this sign that said, it was on a meme, and it said Black inventions, white patents, right? So what happens is you see our ingenuity mysteriously, you know, make it into white mainstream culture, and is and profit, you know, they profit off of our ingenuity. Yeah. So that's just that's a great example where, you know, we give so much also to the world, because I've been blessed to do some traveling in Africa and Europe, and I'm just like, yo, this is hip hop culture. Hip hop culture is Harlem. Hip hop culture is Detroit. Hip hop, you know, I'm in Germany and I'm hearing mumble rap. Like, yo, we be blessing folks. So I began just kind of really examining our contributions and how we view fashion. And, you know, so this piece right here is called Bag Lady. And I was just thinking of, you know, the booster, get your bags. But, you know, just to be a little subversive with on the tags, I put my name on it, JRE, you know. Yeah, and the booster is a very essential person within our community, and it's not even like a Black thing. And I mentioned in some of the interviews, I received a lot of press from this. And in the interview, you know, you see it in Sex and the City. It's an episode when they go to a booster place and they get busted. So, you know, boosters play in you can go in Chinatown, not Chinatown. What's the area called in New York where you know, you see
Chinatown, yeah, down Soho or
Soho, yeah. Excuse me. Up in Soho, where, you know, the boosters are, and so, you know, so I just really began thinking about that and creating this body of work and being unapologetic about it, because there's also a lot of finger wagging, like, well, you know, we shouldn't be. Why we got to spend this much on this, and why we because we do what we do. You know, and I was kind of irked by that. If I was to go somewhere in, you can go anywhere in the world, people value beauty, and, you know, and we have that right to do that. So, you know, I created this body of work, and this is the first time where, if you look at the background here, and I'm gonna just back up real quick before I get into the next piece, I started creating this abstraction. And this was the first time that I even began, although my work is very representative, it has representational components to it, it's becoming abstract, right? And I never view my work as abstract, but I'm like, okay, there's a lot of abstraction going on. And I didn't understand what that abstraction was, right? So this is a piece that I did, that I created this about 2 years ago. And this is a really interesting story with this. obsessively began drawing these circles, and I was cutting them out using collage paper, and they're all around my studio. And I'm just like, damn, this is interesting. I'm doing these orbs, not understanding why. And
yeah.
now it's getting abstract. And one thing I want to say about my process is I am a vessel. So right here, it was a bit intentional when I did, you know, this body of work, but now I'm like, okay, let me trust this process, because now this is when I move. This is the piece I created when I move into my art studio. I have a large art studio. I can afford it now. Now I can really make the work that I really want to work. So like, this is a sacred space now. So, and I said, I'm going to trust the process. I'm not going to even question it. Because a lot of times when I'm in the studio, it's a fight. Like, should I do that? Nah, this not maybe, you know, it may not make a lot of sense at the moment, but so I'm just trusting it. So I've started doing these orbs, and my mom calls me, and she's like, Mimi, that's my nickname. She said, she woke up early in the morning, and how she described it is a star kind of came up to her window, like off of her balcony, right? And I'm like, what do you mean a star? And she was kind of freaking out at first. She was like, yo, it's this circle. It looked like a star. And what she was describing, what we would say in a very through a very Western basic lens, like this was a UFO. The thing that she encountered is very common. Like if you Google flying orb on YouTube, people see them all the time. She and I seen it before, about 10 years ago, but it was in a distance. And I remember looking out the window like, Mom, you see that? And we looking at this circle flying, and it just disappeared. And we like, okay, that's interesting. But at this point, she see this orb, it flies up. And she was like, she kind of shook it off like, wait a minute. Then it came back, this orb. And right now, at this moment, this is when I started doing these circles. And I'm like, yo, what's this all about? And I'm like, for me, how I looked at it is like, it's a wavelength that's happening. Like this is a communication thing, because putting these orbs within these pieces, to me, it felt very spiritual. Like they're, I don't fully know what they mean, but they have some symbolism. This is how I'm processing it. And she tells me this, and I'm like, okay, now we're kind of bouncing off of each other spiritually, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And I feel like a lot of times in my work, I create things and I don't know, I have no clue what they mean. But they find its way in my work. And it may be a year later or a month later that I'll be like, that's what my work is about. At this point, let me see. At this point, huh?
Before we go, can I ask you, you might get to this in a minute, but I do want to make sure we point this out. Now, when I look at the figures at the center of these images, first of all, the coloring, the gray coloring, almost charcoal color, and then the braided hair. Each one of them has the braided hair as a symbol, which I have my guess about. But what is that? Why did you choose that? First, the coloring for the women depicted in these scenes, and then also how the hair is depicted as well.
I think for me, so when I started doing this, when we go back to that first image that I created in this style, when I left oil painting, to be honest, it was an aesthetic decision. It's like, I like the way it looks. I like braids and twists. This is what I like. But as I'm still trying to understand what that is. It is an aesthetic decision, but I know that when people view this work, especially, people of color, people relate to it, it doesn't have an actual color to it. It's grayscale. So, so I can't give this intellectual answer of why I did it. It was strictly, an aesthetic decision, but you're going to see as we get to the end of the presentation, you're going to see my newer pieces. And once I started doing my newer pieces that deals with color, I kind of understood why I did this more. But I want to come back to that when I get to the new pieces, because it will contextualize it better.
And the faces themselves. At first, when I'm first looking at your work, I'm thinking that they are essentially the same face, but they're not. They're all different. They're all slightly different, changed in some kind of way. Why is that? What's the
Yeah. So the thing about my work, all these girls, I've been drawing the same. I'm using the same image over and over again, and I just use variations of them. And for me, what I thought about was like, okay, this is still my story that I'm telling. You see what I'm saying? And so these are, to some degree, the same girls in evolution of their lives or their understanding of themselves and their environment.
So we talked about this the other day, Jamea. We were talking about how I was saying you seems like you only have women as your subjects, and so you said that you just needed some balance because you're surrounded by men most of the time. But it seems like it's a little deeper than that.
It is deeper than that. I think that's one aspect. I do have 3 sons, who they're, anybody know me know that I love men. I love, but I am just surrounded by a lot of testosterone, I'm not gonna lie. But since I was a little girl, when I reflect back, I've always drawn women. And part of that is because, when I look at my family and when we look at many Black Americans' families, we're very matriarchal people, and so the people who've always stood out to me or who always presented strength and perseverance in my life has always been women, period. And so I think that that's all I can say about it. I think that I don't want to intellectualize it too much because it is what it is, right?
Yeah.
But as I'm reflecting, like, okay, I'm surrounded by all men. I've always just drawn women, and I'm like, who's been some of the dopest people in my, like, when I, just looking at my mom, like my mama, we trying to get her a book written about her life because she out cold. You know what I'm saying? Like she dope.
A lot of people are saying that the images look like you. So are these?
They do.
You're aware of that.
I am aware. They all have my eyes, which is my mom eyes.
relative?
So we see these orbs now. So now we started from here. Now the orbs are introduced into the body of work. All right. They're showing up. And so, but then these feathers, these wings on these girls' arms, right? So as people have been asking me about my work, like, well, what's that on their arms? And I'm like, shit, you tell me. I don't know. I'm trying to figure it out too. Because it's such a organic process in the studio. So I'm gonna rewind. So 3 years ago, me and shout out to Marilyn Griffin, my BFF, we went to West Africa 3 years ago, and it was a very interesting experience, very beautiful place, very beautiful people. But right prior to me going, I hired a genealogist. And so those of you who aren't familiar with genealogy work, it's not like the spit test that you would do with like Ancestry.com or 23andMe. It's you're hiring a person and look at your family records. And I had hired them right before I went to Africa, because my thinking was like, yo, if I'm about to go to the motherland, I'm gonna find my tribe. Although I felt it was a long shot, I was just like, I'm just gonna we gonna do our thing. I'm gonna just try and see what happens. So right during the tail end of that trip, while she and I are in Africa, I get a voicemail from my genealogist, and he's like, yeah, Jamea, I need you to call me as soon as possible. I need to talk to you about your genealogy. Something is really strange came up, so I'm like, oh shit, he gonna tell me I'm adopted. I was putting that to the side. Like, I'm gonna wait. I'm just not, that trip was really a lot for us, a lot to process. So anyway, when I come back and I give him a call, he basically essentially tells me that I was able to trace back on both sides of your families into the 1700s, one side on the 1600s. Your family was all Black. They didn't mix with Europeans, and they was never enslaved. And they were from Georgia, Mississippi, Alabama. Like, what? What now? So he gives me this binder full of information. And, you know, to make a really long story short, what I discover is my family is indigenous. So we Black Americans, but we also indigenous Americans.
Is it Choctaw? Is it
Yes,
Choctaw?
Choctaw. Yeah. So my grandma, so what's interesting about that is I grew up Choctaw. Like I remember going to school in Maryland when I first came to McKinney. She was one of the people who would laugh at me like, girl, your coat, your face, your hair, all the same color. And, you know, and they'd be like, what, you mix with something? I'd be like, no, I'm Indian. They're like, oh, okay, cool. You know, because many kids, like, and I remember my other best friend, Catrice, was like, oh yeah, I got Indian in my family too. And, you know, you just dismiss it. But as I grew up, I began identifying more as, you know, Black, you know, I'm a Black girl. And so I essentially forgot about that. I completely forgot about my indigenous heritage and, you know, began identifying with like the sort of the template of what it means to be a Black American. Like, you know, our family was enslaved. We are from Africa, etc. You know, some people that's their story, but for mine, it didn't work out like that. So as I began, I'm like, damn, I literally forgot about this part of my upbringing. And for how I connected the dots, I'm like, that's what these feathers were. That was related to that culture. And also to me, these girls have always had a sense of agency. You know what I mean? A sense of movement. So, you know, I was doing this with the work before I even understood why I had to do it. So that's what I'm saying. Like, you know, certain things work their way into my pieces and I have no clue of why.
So this body. If your recent work has been adopting this, and I was wondering if that was the direction you see yourself going into in the future, you know, kind of bringing more of the culture as you become more familiar with it into the work.
I am. I'm more intentional about it now. I will argue that, you know, I've always done that, but now it's like I kind of understand the work that I'm doing now. So it's just like it's a continuum of what I've always done, you know. Now I can just kind of, so now at this point, so once I get this genealogy, I'm really blessed to be a full-time artist. And now I'm traveling to the archives. Cause I'm like, how is this happening? You know, am I an anomaly? Is my story an anomaly? So I go to the state of Georgia archives, and I go to Mississippi, a county where my family's from. I go to those archives and I'm looking at these records of, you know, these people who are free, labeled as free people of color, as far back, you know, in the 1700s, and some of my family enrolled in Indian rolls. Some enrolled in the Mississippi Choctaw, a few went to Oklahoma. So I made this piece right here, and because now I'm kind of like really overwhelmed by this process, and it was a really hard time for me because I went through like an identity crisis. Like, hold on, wait, what now? So I feel so bad for the people in my life, my husband and my closest friends. I'm like, yo, what is going on? I need y'all to do y'all genealogy, see what comes up. You know, I'm just kind of like just trying to understand, get a better grasp of who I am, and also in relationship to our history. Like, am I the only one? Do y'all got Indian in y'all family? And so when you talk to Black folks, okay, most people, because that's what I do now. Like, where your family from? Okay, and I only do this to my close people. Like, hey, have you heard of it being Indian in your family? And most people say, yeah, I did. I hear Indian. So this piece right here is titled "Photograph with a picture of my Cherokee grandmother on a mantle." And right here, this piece was created for all of the Black Americans who are dismissed about their indigenous heritage, you know, because everybody got Indian in their family, but they don't got Indian in their family because they just don't know, or they hear, and then, you know, one narrative is, or it's not a narrative, but one reality is some people, they, you know, they're not Native. Some people really are, or some people just don't know what they are. So now I'm creating this work in relationship to this, you know, and this woman, you know, and this mantle alongside her, this grandmother, this Indian grandmother. Now, is it, and so now I would be interested to know how viewers, of course, it's out of context now, but viewing this and reading the title, you know, would people look at it and be like, oh, another Negro who is ashamed of being African? Or would they be like, oh, okay, this is if your grandmother, another thing is like, well, if your grandmother is Indian, what that makes you? You see what I'm saying? So now these are questions that these are things that I'm thinking about, and they don't have answers. I'm just trying to figure it out. So this is a really, you know, important piece.
Do you see this as kind of a continuum? So we go from Fly Girls to 7 Mile Girls, and now we're dealing with a whole nother part of our identity and the kind of,
yes,
and the blocks of the building.
Yeah, and it's all me, you know, and it's like one thing I want to emphasize is like, I'm not the representative of Black people or Indigenous Americans. You know, I can only talk about my experience, and once I have conversations with people, this is, you know, they may relate to it and they say, okay, cool. So this is me kind of deconstructing history through myself, like looking in the mirror. And my husband made this really interesting statement. He was on the podcast, and he said, you know, when we look at history, we never view it through our family. You see what I'm saying? So when we look at history, we're like, okay, the history of the United States, you know, we typically may start with Harriet, then Frederick Douglass, and so forth and so on, you know, very key figures within our experience. But I don't know if we're challenged to begin looking at history through our family. You see what I'm saying? Like, if my family was affected by the heroin or crack epidemic, does that mean that every family was? Not necessarily, but if we put it in, you know, once the story is written about the great American history of, you know, our experience, would my story be counted out, you know? So what I felt with my particular family experience with my grandmother and these free people of color, I've never seen that on screen. I didn't read that in the books. I wasn't taught that in history class. So I'm like, okay, now this is a really unique opportunity for me.
This is another thing that you do though, right? So you say that you didn't really see the documentation of the crack era by artists really happening. So you document, right?
Exactly.
That means so you document it. Okay.
That's exactly right. So now, because if we use it for how we do is we try to separate it, or not we, they, whoever you want to assign it to. You got American history and you got Black history. It's really no such thing as Black history. It's really all American history. You know what I'm saying? Because all American history is all Black history, because it ain't no America without us, you know, however you want to look at it. So for me, I feel really charged to tell my side of the story, you know, to add to the full spectrum of experiences, because we're not a monogamous. We're not a monolith, excuse me. You had a question, Drake? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you know what? Actually, no. I mean, you're getting a lot of people are saying a lot of great things. I'm getting a lot of chat notices.
Can I look at it? Let me see. Shoot.
Yeah, but what I was gonna say is we got about 5 more minutes for you to wrap this up. Then you could go longer than that, but I want to give people an opportunity to ask you some questions.
Absolutely.
And what we're gonna do is, there's a raise your hand button on your screens. If you want to ask a question, I'll unmute your mic I'll unmute your mic so you can actually ask the question. But let's just get to that, because I know people probably are burning to ask you.
I know. So I'm actually like towards the end of it. So I'm gonna finish this up. And so now at this point, now I'm going to archives. Now I'm doing research. Now I'm like obsessed with like finding out who I am and who my people were. So what I'm realizing in the Southeast, what happens in terms of history, you know, my part of my family is from Georgia, and it's not just Georgia. Throughout the Southeast, there are many earthen mounds. There's a lot of artifacts that had this the horned serpent, and according to, and every Southeastern clan talks about the horned serpent, and it's this huge snake that lives in the water that has a diamond encrusted horn. But they didn't. We would say like, oh, that's mythology, but they like, nah, that horned serpent is in that damn Mississippi River. Okay. So I had started doing these snakes, these serpents found this way in my work. I didn't understand at the time. Then I go back, I'm like, damn, this is what I've been creating. So you see how I'm creating the work, not understanding why I'm creating it. And I'm just gonna go through this. So now I'm doing this work called Prom Night. So now I'm looking at, in terms of how we view our lives and experience. Mine's I'm also, you know, I'm a Black American, and I'm looking at some of our rituals and practices, and I'm looking at prom now. So prom is very essential. It's a very serious coming of age ritual where families, whether your kid doing good in school or not, whether you broke, rich, you know, many families, not all of course, but many families, they invest a lot of money into this process, right? And so so I'm looking at it not just like, oh, this is prom. I'm looking at this as a coming of age ritual that we do, that I want us to kind of contextualize it a little bit more. I'm an art scholar, but I'm not a PhD scholar. You know what I mean? So now I'm thinking about this. This piece is called Slow Dance with Big Chief. This is, you know, the queen seated at her throne. And this is, I'm thinking about young people, you know, and when you look at the prom pictures in 2020, these kids are killing it, okay? I mean, they got thrones, they got, I mean, it's, and I'm really intrigued by it. I'm very inspired by it. But now I'm looking at it through my experience with prom, and also through, like, you know, my heritage. And so, you know, now I'm incorporating some horned serpent. So above her head is this serpent, you know. This is I rarely do men, but this is a time that I did this, the prom king. You had your prom queen.
Wow.
Right? And I'm going to, these the girls, fly chicks with fly whips, seated on the car. You see the people in the background with their signs, like, and we'll see, you know, in the proms, you have, it's a communal sort of ritual, and people are coming out and supporting these young people being fly. This is called Girl with Red Cape, and I'm just going to my last exhibition was called 7 Mile Girls. This is my first museum solo show.
Yeah, it's gorgeous.
And all of my girls, they all have on alligator shoes, all of them.
I love it.
For those of you who are not familiar, Detroit, I don't know how it is now. But growing up, I remember wearing some ostrich. I had ostrich shoes. You know, I wouldn't necessarily wear that. Now I'm a little more, you know, I'm a little more conscious of it. I don't want to wear dead animals on me, but it was, you know, if you have some gators, some big blacks, you killing the city. So I make sure that and I'm incorporating that into it. And I guess I'll end right here. So this piece well, no, I won't end right here. So this piece is called Girl in Urban Oasis. My grandfather was a entrepreneur in Detroit in the early 1900s. He had a diamond company and a bread company and a bread distribution company. He was a bad brother. Lost it all, but it was there. So I was imagining these sort of urban oases that you hear. You hear about it in Tulsa, Oklahoma, right? But of course they were everywhere. So this is a piece that's a dedication of that. And finally, so now I'm doing these girls. I'm gonna end here. So this is called The Red Bone That Could Make Rain. And red bone is a term that I didn't hear my mother told me she always knew of the word red bone. That's for people who got red features or light skin, got red hair. And when I went down to Mississippi for college, people was calling me a red bone. Like they would say, "Are you Creole?" And I'm like, "No, I'm just from Detroit," you know. But when I began researching this indigenous culture, I didn't realize that red bone is an actual tribe. So for those of you who are not familiar, that's an Indian tribe, the red bones. And so, yeah, I created this piece, and you know that, you know, this now my girls got magic, what we would call magic, but they have powers because they understand who they are. They understand what they can do, what they can be. And so I'm going to end right here because my new body of work, I'm still working on it. I'm going to be releasing a lot of stuff within the next month. I'm not quite ready yet because they're really large scale. And I'm like, when they come out, they got to come out together. So yeah, this is where I'm at. And I realized I'm doing these girls that have color in them. Not all of them are red. These two are. But for me, these works kind of represent the full spectrum of what it means to be a Black American, because we come in all shades and flavors, you know. And when I was doing the grade scale girls, I didn't necessarily have to address that. That was more like a universal kind of, you know, anybody can enter in, and which is beautiful. But now when I started doing these colorful girls, red girls, some are purple, some are going to be blue, I'm like, this is interesting because now, you know, what does it mean to be red? What does it mean to be a red bone? What is that? You know what I mean? And I didn't know until I went on this journey that a red bone is an actual tribe, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm gonna end.
Excellent, Jamea. I mean, beautiful pieces. Actually, another collage artist. Well, actually, we have two collage artists on the line. We have Judy Bowman, and of course, we have Emar Hutchins. But Judy joined late, and she said, "Is it a way that while we ask questions of you during this next few minutes, that you can just replay the slides?"
Absolutely, yeah. I can go back to wherever. Yeah, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go right back on to the beginning, and as the questions come for references, I'll, you know,
And
I'll go through it.
and so I mean, round. I'm gonna unmute all the mics just to do a round of applause because round of applause.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Beautiful.
So much. All right.
And so that's the first clap because you're gonna talk about your stuff. We're gonna take some questions from folks.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
So I see a lot of them, and I was asking folks to raise their hands, but I don't know if everybody sees that function or not. But Phil, you there? Okay, Phil must have fallen off.
You're gonna. So I don't have that.
I'll ask him. I have him right here. So.
Okay, cool. Bet.
Yep. Start the slide. Oh, she said start the slide.
Okay.
And somebody asked if the one where you had red bone, is that the only one where you have someone where a girl has color? Because all of the other ones have a charcoal based kind of a vibe to them.
As funny as this is, I've only started doing colored girls, right? Oh Lord. And that's charged, and it's, I mean, so I started doing colored girls just in February. So this is new. I had a residency in New Orleans with the Joan Mitchell Foundation, which was cut short because of the pandemic. So I was doing these works, and it was all new colored girls. So this new era that I'm in my practice, I'm using colored girls.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not saying that the grayscale girls aren't going to enter it, but right now I'm interested in the colored girls.
Okay. Are there any things that have developed, I mean, out of this whole quarantine process, or that you've done that you didn't even foresee yourself doing over the last 2-3 months?
Well, so for me, this quarantine has been how can I describe it? What I said since this happened, I understand the blues more. And if I understand the blues more, I understand our story more, right? The Black American experience. Because what to me is when I look at how specifically my family, so in my records, we, as I'm looking at my people, some were pushed out of where they lived, and some never left. Like most of them never left. They stayed there. They've been there hundreds of years, maybe thousands of years. But I'm thinking like, yo, if we dealing with this in 2020, and I'm looking at Detroit, and I just want to shout out to all my people, not just in Detroit, everywhere who lost their family. Like, yo, I just want to send my condolences during this process. And and I'm looking at these numbers of like majority Black people are dying. Like that ain't cool. What's up with that? It ain't really been addressed how it should have. And now I'm thinking about, okay, when I'm looking at my history and my family history, you have the Black lens of it, then you have the indigenous lens of it. They both intersect, but I'm like, yo, we've been being played. We always bounce back. They try to kill out a generation, and now when I'm thinking about like when I remember when Bebe's kids came out, and it was like, we don't die, we multiply. And I think that when you look at history from those who share minds, like, they tried to take us out with smallpox blankets, then with the crack epidemic, then with the, you know what I'm saying? So
it's like the road splitting up from the concrete.
Exactly. And so it just bring a different, I've never experienced that though. I've lived a very relatively comfortable life.
But you've had some, but you say you lost your brother, you lost your aunt, people close to you. I did. Even still with that, like, my brother was murdered in 2014, and he was, carjacked by a young man, young man, I think 19 at the time. He didn't even take the chain. My brother was, shot. But how I look at that is like, he's another casualty to to an experience that many people can relate to. Like if you live in the urban areas and not so urban areas, but even still with that, that was a major blow to my family. And that's it, Judy. That was a major blow to my family, but we still bounced back. That was 6 years ago. We still have to deal with that hurt and pain, but now how I'm looking at the work is, it's like the things that are systemic and intentional on our communities, right? And I was just, now when I started, because my son is a jazz musician and I hear him playing the blues, when I'm hearing those scales and those notes, it is just, I'll hear it and bounce to it, but I'm like, oh shit. So I can imagine this is in the early 1900s. If it's rough now, just imagine it then. So it's that. So what I'm listening to is I'm listening to the blues, and how I'm listening to this music is I'm like, this is indigenous music, whether with the African influence from the indigenous American influence. So this is language, and so as I'm listening to this language that my son is playing through his instrument, I'm like, how does that translate through my art? So this work is very much so influenced by the blues, which is very much experienced by this pain, feeling helpless, because at the end of the day, it's like, okay, we have all these Black deaths from this pandemic, this invisible illness that's attacking us. And it's like, well, what can we do about it? And it's like, well, we have our voice. And I don't know if we realize how powerful our voice is, right? Yeah. And so what I'm doing is I'm taking our sound, those chords, and I'm trying to translate them into the visual. So yeah, it's changed. I don't know if it sounds kind of esoteric. It's out there. It sounds good.
Okay.
You're good. We feeling it. And Hernandez, she's been with us every week. She has a question for you.
Okay.
Yeah, it's actually more of a comment. As a Black Latina, as an immigrant Black Latina, I was always intrigued by how Black Americans define themselves. And I think it's I appreciate you bringing up that we need to start looking at history from our own families, because I was always intrigued by the conflict of, am I Black enough? And that if you didn't fit that mold of what the history books or what people have as the stereotypical Black, the conflict that a lot of Black Americans felt in, can I really have ownership of being part of this group if I don't fit all the negative stereotypes that sort of the world has put on us. So I appreciate you saying, you know, my family, they were not enslaved. You know, that doesn't discredit you or make you less Black. You know, it's just you have a different experience. And I know I always have to remind people, I'm like, yeah, I'm Black, but remember, I wasn't born in this country. So I don't know all these different things, but that doesn't make me any less Black. It just means that I come from a different place. And if we begin to sort of recognize that and help each other honor that, I think it only can make us stronger, because we're definitely not the minority, but sometimes we behave as if we are, because among ourselves, we have a checklist of whether you belong or not. So, I mean, I appreciate you bringing that up.
No problem. And for me, thank you for that very thoughtful comment, because when I went on this journey, I had to go back on, I went to colonial records, like what the hell is Blackness? Because nowhere any indigenous people, in terms of nowhere, whatever continent you're looking on, would define themselves as Black. They would describe themselves by their clan, etc. So I'm like, Black is a construct created by white folks to put people in a very specific box, right? So that's a whole other conversation. But Blackness is a construct, period. In terms of what it was intended for, how it was created, and its label, you know, and as we embark on this 2020 census, you know, people starting to pay attention, and it's like, so Egyptians are white as well? Okay, how'd that play out? And I taught for a total of 13 years, and many of my students the past 5 years were Latino. And when I would go in a book and I would go into the system, I was 99% of them, I labeled themselves as white. It's not a, you know, I was just like, oh, that's interesting. So it is a construct that certain groups may or may not have, because you want to get in, if you have the access, you like, well, shit, if I have an option between the two.
One of your students is on here and said you taught her Jade
from Carroll.
Yeah.
Yes. Hey, Jade. Hey, girl.
And I have Damien's mic unmuted. Damien has a question for
Damien.
you.
Yes.
Damien, you there?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, very good. I didn't have my boom down. I collect a lot of work and I look at a lot of work, so it's important to me to understand the scale of the work. And that I just realized in this forum that I couldn't understand that. So I mean, so like roughly how large are these pieces?
That's a really great question. This is a small piece.
I wasn't the only one. A lot of people had that question.
I know.
Anyway.
This is like 3 feet by 4 feet, but this piece right here is 6 feet by 6 feet.
Okay.
This is 8 feet by 6 feet. So when I was,
Nice.
This is 6 feet by 6 feet. They're all in that range, and I just want to go back. This piece is about 14 feet in width, 7
Nice.
feet in height, 6 by, and
Okay.
so this piece is, this is 16 feet in width. So these are really large scale pieces, and the pieces that I'm creating now are like 20 feet long. So these are all monumental scale pieces, and you know, I feel really empowered to have the space to create those monumental pieces, because that is a privilege, and I recognize that.
Okay,
So,
now I understand. So now I can put that into context when you mentioned that you had like a larger studio. So once you got a larger studio, then you started creating larger works. Then I got it.
absolutely, yes, yes.
Nice. Love your work.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Damien.
We have another question from Lakila Brown. Lakila, you there?
Hi, yeah, I'm here. Hi, Jamea.
Hi, Lakila.
I wanted to say a couple of things. when you were like talking about like being from Detroit and going to Henry Ford, I had this like pain in my heart because I was like, oh man, we could have been friends and like a support system for each other because like I went to Cody and I have to experience the like, did you go to casting? Like, and it's like, no,
Yeah.
I went to the hood school, but like, so I had a couple of questions and a couple of comments. For your 7 Mile Girl series, I know you're like very much interested in representing sort of like just like images of Black girls, but I was also interested too, like in your in there was this one piece in particular, you were talking about your uncle and being an entrepreneur and stuff. Then it sort of becomes also like a portrait of the city in a way too. And like I know like 7 Mile and how like we used to just ride back and forth, you know, up and down 7 Mile, but it just like makes me think like too, it also becomes a portrait of the city in a way too, when you start bringing in some landscape. And then I wanted to ask about the orbs that you and your mom were seeing. And I was just wondering, what is there any like meaning that you assign to them, or does it like start to mean anything for you? And then the like sort of almond shapes, those are the feathers, right, that you were talking about?
Yeah. So with the orbs, to me, it's how I look at it. So when my mother described her coming in close contact, she said she felt this sense of peace. She wanted to be scared, but she wasn't. And to me, that is allegorical to our family's history, which is part of the greater, larger Black American experience, which is also part of the larger Indigenous American experience, is that even in spite of we have this protection, you know, there's going to be many of us who are sacrificed, unfortunately, who are going to be casualties to this beast or system that we're in. So when she saw this sense of peace, and it's like, and she looked at it as guardian angels. And now when I'm saying orbs, since the beginning of time, when you even look at cave paintings, artifacts on every corner of the earth, these orbs were there. So this isn't something that's new or I'm inventing, right? We see it, I watched it, they call it Ancient Aliens, where they look at, this is show on History Channel, and they look at ancient art and artifacts and kind of deconstructing what it symbolizes. And so we've always understood that, and in other cultures it is looked at as angels or spirits. So how I want to so looking at this piece in particular, you know, they're kind of going into her, like, you know, I am because we are, and I'm saying we as in spiritually, like we are very special people, you know, everybody's special, but you know what I mean. About our narrative and our experience. So I look at it as like these are angels. These are our spirits. These are these forms of protection that is around us, even in spite of you have, you know, a lot of horrible things that are happening. So even with these on these girls, these wings, or I looked at it as two things, because when I created this work, many people was asking me like, what's your definition of luxury? And what I defined it as is agency to do whatever the hell I want to do, to live as I want to live and present myself how I see fit. And when I look at my, you know, particularly the women in my family, we've always just had agency, always. And, you know, those wings symbolize freedom, but then it also, when I go back and I'm looking, you know, at the archives and I'm looking at artifacts that were found in these ancient mounds, these ancient pyramids in Georgia, Virginia, Alabama, Maryland, look them up if you don't know it. Ancient mounds in the US that's dated, some as old or older than the pyramids of Giza here in the U.S. that we don't find out about. When you look at the artifacts that are found in these mounds throughout the country, and now mind you, this is post me doing this work, I'm seeing these motifs on the figures that they were conveying, So, when we are creating works, or whatever type of expression that we have is really not new. Everything is cyclical. We may not know whether it's coming from, this continent, because we, as she mentioned earlier, some of us migrated, from the Caribbean, and we come from all over. So a lot of these symbols and these choices we make is part of that larger history that we don't even know. I remember, in the 90s, it was a thing for the dudes to wear the snakes around their neck. You know what I'm saying? Like that was, but it's something powerful about that. It's something very powerful about that.
Very something.
The gold teeth, it's like, so yeah. I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent, but all that to say is that everything that all of us create, we just gotta, you may find it out in your lifetime or you may not, but I've been blessed to kind of connect some of the dots in my process.
Mm-hmm. We have another a question from Carlos and Kathleen. Kathleen Deal has a question, but I'll ask Carlos's question. Carlos asks, are your prints on canvas or wood?
Canvas. These are all pieces on canvas.
Okay. And Kathleen, I'm looking for your question. I don't see it, but I mean, you know what, Jamea, you're getting a lot of great feedback. I just must say that this is wonderful. Oh, I think you answered her question. She said, how large are the pieces you're working with? Are you working on an easel or a table? What perspective do you have when you're working on them? Are you looking up or are they on the ground?
I work flat. They're on, what do you call it? Sawhorses? Is that what it's called?
Okay, yeah.
So I have it propped on, so like it'd be, so if you don't know what a sawhorse is, look it up. What's funny is I just discovered sawhorses. I've been doing art for so long. I've only been using sawhorses the past like 2 years. And I'm like, really, my back, really? So I have to work flat because my process, I haven't talked much about my process. So this is all additive. Everything is additive, meaning, I'm starting with a blank canvas. I draw the faces, I cut them out, I glue them.
And there are no sketches, right? There are no sketches, Jamea.
There's no sketches. Yeah. No sketching. I just, because I'm like, this is a very spiritual process. I'm going to let it unfold. I'm going to let the spirit guide me. Like, I really honor and respect it because I'm like, I have this privilege to be able to do this full time and take care of my family. Like, I got to make sure that I'm honoring it, whatever this gift that I have. And so this is all papers that some are handmade papers, some are store-bought papers. Friends who are teachers, before they throw their students artwork out, I'm like, yo, come on, bring it, do not waste. So there is some recycling that I'm doing, and this is all glue. I use a lot of gel medium. When I'm drawing, I'm using ink pen. This is ink pen. These are also, I'm using, so it's collage / assemblage because I'm like the frame has pearls on it. This is fabrics. It's fabrics in there. Going back forward. So as you can see in his crown, it's rhinestones. My process is very tedious because those are like, I have a big pile of paper in my studio, tiny pieces. It was a mess.
Like, how do you make those feathers? The feathers sound like they're incredible or incredibly
just
difficult.
Cut them out. It's all paper. It's all paper. But see, I didn't bring. Now what I'm doing is the pieces they're becoming sculptural. Damn, let me see. Okay, so this is a great example. Look at that water. You have to see my work in person because it's a lot of glitter. It's a lot of depth to the work that you just won't see. But that water is, sculptural. It's all paper. So it's like what do you call it? So paper mache. Once you add glue to paper, you know, it hardens. So now I'm sculpting with the paper.
Someone just asked, do you have a picture of your studio?
No, I don't. That's a good question. No, I don't.
Man, can you email it out to us later?
I will. I can. You know what? I don't try to judge me. I don't try to judge me. It's rough.
No judgment. No judgment.
Someone said, do you ever use reverse applique?
No.
Or
Yeah.
Mod Podge?
No. So this is the thing. My process is my work. It's a lot of money to make this work. And when I say, so when I go if I go to the art supply store or paper source, I'm coming out spending about $600 in paper.
Mm-hmm.
Then I'm also, I use gel medium, and I'm just I like gel medium. It's expensive. I'd be like, damn, I wish I had, I don't like the Mod Podge. I don't like I like what I like. And so what I do is I adhere it with the gel medium, and I'm also painting on top of the painting with the gel medium to seal it, to make sure that it's good,
Good.
Get that good on. Get that good.
Years ago, let's put like this, I had a show, and I used some spray glue, and I was at the show, and a damn piece fell off, and I almost died. Like, okay.
Yeah.
So that kind of.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. That's Emar says he would love to see your process in your studio.
He in DC. You hit me up, Emar. If y'all in the DMV, are you visiting? Like people hit me up all the time. I do studio. You want to do a studio visit?
Yeah, let's make sure we get that information out and make sure everyone, before we move here.
Yeah.
There's a number of artists in the DC area I know happen to be on this. This. Yeah.
What we'll do is, I think everybody is registered. I think we can actually send out an email, but we can. It looks like we've come to the 12:30 mark, and we can.
Well, let's give our thanks then. I can't tell you, Jamea, how great this has been, how fantastic it is.
Thank you.
Yeah, I told you coming in, I had a million questions myself, and it's like we all asked them, which is fantastic. I think it's great.
Thank you. This one passed quick. Thank you.
Can we make sure that everyone knows where to find you or follow you on social media? Also, I know your website as well.
Yeah. My website is super sus. I'm not gonna lie. It's super sus, but I'm going to get that done. But Instagram is where you can find me. Facebook, I'm on the social media platforms. I haven't been as active because, when I was on it, I was getting really stressed out, as we going through this pandemic. Like, I've been going through it. And, because I'm reading, it's all this like, damn, we all about to die. The world is ending. They got killer bees, aliens. I'm like, I got to get off of this. So I'm kind of like, I'm in and out. I usually, if you message me, hit me up with questions on either social media platform. I'm good with answering questions. And I think Instagram is the place where because I also do the Insta stories. I used to link it to my Facebook, but it stopped linking somehow. So I got to figure that out. So yeah, social media. And it's my government name, Jamea Richmond-Edwards.
Well, thank you, Jamea. And this has been wonderful. And round of applause.
Thank you.
Definitely. And we definitely are looking forward to to great things from you.
All right, good job, Mimi. Very good job, Mimi.
Mom, that's my mother. Okay, Mom. And I just want to say also, I know we I'm because I'm here, but I'm also like I'm there with everybody. You know, we all don't know what's gonna happen, but you know what they say, we don't die, we multiply. We got to keep it moving. And you know, I'm just really blessed to have this opportunity to tell our story and have a platform. And yeah, let's stay connected.
All right.
Absolutely.
Sounds good. Sounds good. I want to give a special thanks to everyone who comes in, and a few people have been here every week. Much love to you, without a doubt. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining. And Jamea, I hope you join us next week and then check us out as well.
I'm on it now. I'm on it. Okay, guys.
Good stuff. Good stuff. Okay, good people. I'm out. Peace.
All right. All right now. All right, everybody.